Hey, it's John F. Gately. You can call me Jack, and welcome back to the show. We have a great show for you today. We are going to talk right off the bat about hold on, we're going to reveal that later. We're going to reveal that later. That was just a quick tease. Didn't want to show you that, but you got a quick glimpse. We'll bring that up later in today's show. But we are definitely going to talk about this great Bill Maloogian post and the crisis of legitimacy for law enforcement in Massachusetts. So if you have not seen this Bill Maloogian post that just came up, he basically just screenshotted all of the press releases from ERO Boston, which is ICE in Boston. And we're going to talk about what that means for the legitimacy of local law enforcement here in Massachusetts going forward. As you all know, 3 or 4 child rapists were announced to have been arrested by ICE within the last couple of weeks here, and all of the announcements occurred last week. We're going to talk about what that means for the legitimacy of law enforcement in Massachusetts. We're also going to go over the Healy Hotel plan. So you might have noticed that late last week, Governor Healy, when she was hoping that you weren't paying attention, is now going to try to move the illegals from the 56 Healy hotels into long-term apartments that would otherwise be on the marketplace for American citizens of Massachusetts, are now going to be subsidized and occupied by illegal immigrants. There's been a pilot program on this all year long. It has not gone well. We have the numbers. We're going to talk about that in today's episode. And then also in this episode, we're going to talk about Amy Carnevale. She's the chairwoman of the Massachusetts GOP. She went on Keller at Large this weekend at WBZ. And we're going to talk about what we need to do for 2026 in terms of the ripple effect of this Trump election and what that all means for the Massachusetts GOP going forward from here. So let's cut first off to Fox 25 and their report of Governor Healy's plan to save hundreds of millions of dollars. What was very interesting in the Healy Hotel program, what was very interesting and a glaring omission was that nowhere in the proposal by Governor Healy was there an idea about how much more she would be asking to increase what they call the home base or rental subsidy program. Now, the home base rental subsidy program has already seen several years of millions and millions of additional dollars being poured into it over the last couple of years. And she said that she's going to change the program to dramatically increase the subsidy of the home base program going forward. But she left out one big item on that list, is that how much is that actually going to cost? Instead, she left that out. Instead, she just focused on how much it's going to save without actually telling us how much the new plan is going to cost. Of course, you don't want to talk about that. She said that the subsidy will go up, but how much is that going to be from a line item point of view, from how much the state is going to pay? We don't need those details. You're not entitled to those details. Let's cut to Fox 25.
Significant changes coming to the state's emergency shelter system. They include plans to phase out hotels and shorten long-term stays for homeless families and migrants. Boston 25 News reporter Drew Caritas live at the State House, Drew, with a closer look at how the state plans to reduce costs.
And Kerry, Governor Healy's plan to stop using hotels and motels for emergency shelters and to cut down on shelter stays will come with increased resources for finding long-term housing, including ramping up rental subsidies for those who qualify for emergency shelter.
But how much that will cost, they're not saying right now. They're going to increase the subsidy, as I said, but they're not going to tell you how much that's going to cost. Additionally, let's just set aside the financial cost of the state. As we referenced already, that's going to dramatically increase the demand for apartments in Massachusetts. Right now, we have the round number is 7,500 families in emergency shelter and probably more on the wait list and whatever. Now we're going to be pouring all of those families into the apartment rental market. Bueller, let me just ask, if you increase the government subsidy and also increase the demand for the product, anyone? Bueller, what's going to happen to the price? What's going to happen to the price? The price is going to go up. This is very similar to what happened, if you want to think of 1,000 government programs, but college loans, right? The government subsidizes the price of college and increases the number of people who go to college. Anyone? Bueller? What happens to the price of college? Anyone? It goes up. It goes up. It's not hard to figure out. And what is that? That's going to be the rent of working class citizens of Massachusetts that are not subsidized are really going to feel this.
Slashing Massachusetts emergency shelter system costs down to $350 million from the more than $1 billion spent this fiscal year is expected to bring dramatic changes.
So theoretically, they're going to cut it by $650 million. Okay, theoretically, we're going to get to that, how this is going.
To make the governor's plan work, the shelter system and all of us who work in it have to work faster than we are right now.
And that's because, if we could just bring this up, let's see here. I'm going to bring up the numbers for you just to give some context to this. That is because right now, the pilot program was designed in this calendar year to locate or relocate, or to settle to resettlement is the name of the program. And the numbers on this just came out late last week up until October of this year. The program was designed to resettle 400 migrant families. That's not going that very well. Right now, they've only resettled 57 as of the end of October, with another 73 having signed leases but not yet moved. Let me do math. That's 130 families, and they're supposed to do 400 by the end of the calendar year. So they haven't even hit the halfway point on their goal, and they only have 8 weeks left in the year. Remember, the report went up to October 31st. So when he says that they have to do a better job, that's because this guy knows that the pilot program is moving very, very slowly. Also, Mr. Thielman, whatever this guy's name is, he runs one of the nonprofits that's actually mismanaging the pilot program. It's funny how Drew Carides at Fox 25 can't seem to interview anybody else. This guy is all over the media, but what the media kind of hardly ever tells you is he's running one of these resettlement programs that isn't doing very well.
Thielman, president and CEO of the International Institute of New England, supports the state's plan to phase out 56 hotels and motels being used as shelters.
Well, of course he supports the plan, because his nonprofit is now going to be running the new plan
Across the state, and that the Healey administration is proposing that the rental stipend families can receive under the state's home-based program.
So that's up, obviously, $10,000 a year. And I would just go on the record here is that the home-based program in and of itself is not a bad thing if it was restricted to citizens. But when you start giving it away to basically anybody in the world, then it gets out of hand. And what's going to happen is this $1 billion that we're spending on hotels and Healey hotels and shelters, it's just going to be transferred over to, you guessed it, the apartment market. This is really not that hard to figure out.
Increase from $15,000 per family per year to $25,000 per family per year.
It supports them for a while as their income increases.
The state's plan aims to reduce the 7,500 family limit across the shelter system to below 3,500. Governor Healey is also planning on lowering the 9-month limit on most homeless families at emergency shelters to 6 months, which would require the approval from lawmakers.
I think moving to a 6-month limit is going to be tricky.
Thielman
So he's going to fight that, clearly.
says most of the migrant families his organization is working with in the shelter system have been temporarily paroled into the country for humanitarian reasons. He tells us many have applied for or
Oh, well, that's interesting. Governor Healy recently tried to tell us, that 65% of the people in the Healy hotels were long-term residents of Massachusetts. Now Mr. Thielman is basically telling us something different. All right, what happened to Mr. Thielman? Well, somehow we lost the audio here. Don't worry. Oh, there we go.
Have the ability to revoke someone's lawful status.
So that last part there, sorry, I hit the wrong button. That last part there talks about how Trump is going to impact this program and whether or not he'll be able to revoke the parole status that has been previously granted to people that entered during the Biden administration. And there's some controversy of whether or not he'll be actually able to do that. But one thing is for sure is that he will probably stop issuing parole for people coming into the United States. So the whole parole problem that has been feeding the population in Massachusetts will probably be alleviated now that we've elected President Trump to a second term, because he's probably going to stop the parole program or modify it in such a way that it will stem the tide. Which then again gives the lie to Maura Healey's whole thing that it's the federal government. We can't do anything. It's the federal. Remember, we are the only state in the country that has a shelter law. It's not a right to shelter law. There is no right to shelter in the Constitution or anything like that. It's a shelter law. And literally the first 3 words of the shelter law says subject to appropriation. It is not a right like your Second Amendment right, which they're happy to get rid of. It's just a program, just like the parks program or this program or that program. It's just a program. And at any time, the legislature could amend the program to require citizenship, for instance. But they don't want to, so they're not going to do that. Of course, all of the media is completely on board with the lie that Healy is going to end the state use of hotels as shelter. What they don't then answer, whether it's BUR or Fox 25 or whoever, what they are so uncurious about is what comes next and how much that will be. Now, Drew Caritas, Fox 25, good credit on them that they actually mentioned that in the piece, but hardly anybody really wants to know what's next. And the truth is, what's next is what they call resettlement. And this is basically, I know this is going to come as a shock to you, but basically they're taking the Afghan and Iraqi resettlement program template and rinsing and repeating it for immigrants from across the world. And last week, the Healy administration issued a required report, and don't worry about this, we're not going to get into the weeds on this, but the report on how that resettlement program is going came out late last week. And again, don't worry, we're not going to get into the details of, we're not going to kill you with that, because last week, many of you noticed that I wrote up an article on that. And we also mentioned the numbers briefly on the show already today. But last week, they came up and they said, and I just want to make sure I get these numbers right, a total of 57 immigrants and refugee families have been resettled into long-term housing. That's those apartments through the resettlement agencies funded through this appropriation, while 73 have been signed leases but not yet moved. That's 130 families out of the goal of 400. And if I got this news report from Fox 25 right, they want to resettle 4,000 families. They've had almost a full year to resettle 400 families, and they've done 130. Now, the stated goal is to resettle 4,000 families, to bring the EA housing program from 7,500 down to 3,500 families. They can't do 400 families. How are they going to do 4,000 families. Like, and how much is that going to cost? Cray, right? It's just absolutely insane. By the way, I love your comments. Let's see if I have any comments today. Let's see. We have a first comment here. What is this administration fee? Like, right. James wants to know how much Thielman and the nonprofit that he runs is actually making. That's a good question. I don't know the answer, I'm sure. Angry Survivor said, this is a nightmare for, right. So Angry Survivor is referring to, I think the number is actually 39, to be fair. Child rapist that ERO Boston has arrested this calendar year, right? And we're going to get into the crisis of local law enforcement as we started the show. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But so far, the pilot program to transition these folks from hotels to apartments isn't going very well. It's incredibly expensive. It's very slow, as Mr. Thielman just admitted. And it's probably not going to work. Plus, it's going to drive up the cost of apartments, which, check me if I'm wrong, are already kind of too high, right? If we heard one thing from 2024 election, especially here in Massachusetts, is that affordability is a huge issue. We heard that affordability is a huge issue, the economy and immigration, as Amy Carnevale correctly said on Keller at Large this weekend. Those are the two top issues. By the way, let's do it now. You see me wearing it. This is the Maura cartoon clown t-shirt. It is now available. Let me just lean back here. There you go, right there. It is now available. Isn't that awesome? It is now available for the conservative on your Christmas list, not your holiday list, but your actual Christmas list. The Maura clown t-shirt. It looks great, doesn't it? The Maura clown t-shirt, complete with red nose, is now available for your conservative on your Christmas list at johnfgately.printify.me. I'll tweet out the link later. How do I say that again? Printify. Printify. John F. Gately at .printify.me. Make sure I get it right. johnfgately.printify.me. The Maura Clown cartoon t-shirt now available. Our first ever piece of merch on this account. You can go buy one if you want to support this channel. That would be awesome. And obviously, it looks great. By the way, the Maura that you will get will be slightly smaller. This is a prototype. Maura that you will get, her head will be just a little bit smaller on the t-shirt. So, all right. So, very excited about the t-shirt thing, but let's move on, shall we? Let's see. Buck says awesome for the t-shirt. Thank you, Buck. Thank you. I think he likes the t-shirt. All right, good. If you support the channel, help us out a little bit, buy a t-shirt. That would be awesome. Now, there's been a lot of talk, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, about all of these criminals that have been released basically amongst us, that ICE has arrested over the last couple of weeks. And as Angry Survivor said, 39 over the course of the year that are raped, like literally have raped children. Because Massachusetts is now the place to come if you want to hide out from justice in Brazil. It used to be like, Sundance Kid, right? They went to South America, right? Didn't they go to Peru? If you're now Peruvian, you come to Massachusetts. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy and sad. But that's but Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, didn't they go to Peru to kind of escape? And they finally got shot down there, I'm pretty sure. But now, if you want to escape justice in your country, like Brazil or Peru or whatever, you come to Massachusetts to hide out. And obviously, last week was a very bad week for the Healey administration on this topic. So what they did, you got to understand how the media works. You have this bad thing happen, and so then you have some people that aren't you, but basically you're telling them what to do. trot out some think pieces or some articles in friendly news outlets to kind of spin it your way. And one of the most egregious of these was an opinion piece by Jim Jordan, who's a lifer from the Boston Police Department. He's now retired. He used to work at strategic planning, I believe, at Boston Police Department, at Commonwealth Beacon. And the headline is, Trump's mass deportation order would create disaster for communities and a crisis of legitimacy for local police. And I guess my question for Mr. Jordan, as we watch the video of Laken Riley's mom finding out that she's passed, isn't this the crisis of legitimacy? It doesn't this create, when you allow an illegal immigrant to come into the United States, he goes to New York City, and then he gets a free airline ticket to anywhere in the country, and then he does what he did to Laken Riley. Isn't this the crisis of I think this is the crisis of legitimacy, Mr. Jordan. Not what you're so worried about. You're so worried about the fact that maybe illegal immigrants won't be interested in talking to the police if they're a victim of the crime. And, my point of view is, if you're a victim of a crime as a legal immigrant, maybe go home, maybe go back. Self-deportation is a great solution. Go back. There should be no illegal immigrant crime in the United States. So often we hear that migrants commit crime at a lower rate than regular Americans. That may or may not be true. I have no idea whether that's true or not. But what I do know is that the rate of illegal immigrant crime should be zero. There should be no illegal immigrant crime because they shouldn't be here to begin with. Real simple math. You shouldn't be here. Consequently, you shouldn't be committing crimes here. End of story. It's really not that hard. It's almost like when you see Kathy Hochul struggle with math when she says, well, we're saving you $6 on the toll, right? The toll story that came up. And she said, well, the toll was going to be $15, but now we're only charging you $9. So you saved $6. Oh, no. You're charging me $9. That's like it's like when my wife comes back from TJ Maxx and she said, I saved $30. Oh, really? How much did it cost me to save $30? And I look at the receipt and it says $83. So I had to spend $83 to save $30. Right? That's how liberal math works. Oh, we're going to charge you $15, but now we're saving you $6. It's only a $9 toll to go below Central Park. It's the same concept. There should be zero illegal immigrant crime because you shouldn't be here. And then comes, if we can just put out what I think was perhaps the stupidest take on this. This comes from Roberto Jimenez Rivera, who as you can see, he has his Blue Sky account, because Blue Sky is such a empty place. In order to get people to subscribe to you on Blue Sky, you have to advertise your name on X. All right, so Roberto Jimenez Rivera, who I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is a city councilor in Chelsea, or ran for it. He's either elected or ran for it. Maura Healey will stand up to Trump's policies by making sure migrants have nowhere to go or sleep. So if you think about that for a second, he's being sarcastic. God forbid we just tax the wealthy so we continue to uphold our legal right to shelter. Again, we're already taxing the wealthy. You already passed the millionaire's tax, and there is no legal right to shelter. There is no legal right to shelter. Rich people need their tax cuts, according to Mr. Jimenez Rivera. Little, tongue in cheek there on his part. In other words, Maura is also feeling it from the far left of her party. As you heard Mr. Thielman, he's not too happy with the 9 to 6 month reduction in the stays. We'll see if the legislature approves that. Of course, there'll be all sorts of loopholes in it, just like there is now. The current stay in the Healy Hotel is 348 days. Let me just say that again in case 348 days is the average stay in a Healy Hotel. It's basically a year. Yeah, shocking. And we'll see if they actually move it from 9 to 6 months. But even if they do, understand the sleight of hand that's going on here. That's just a headline. There'll be all sorts of loopholes in the same way that saying that we're going to save all this money on shelter at the hotels, that's just a headline. What they're really doing is moving to apartments, which are going to be perhaps much more expensive or just as expensive, and will also have an additional cost to the community in that it's going to drive up the cost of apartments. Right now, it's just driving up the cost of a hotel room, right? You're limiting the supply of hotel rooms, driving up the cost of hotel rooms. But in the future, Healy's solution is actually going to drive up the cost of apartments, and apartments for the people that are working class people, right? This is not going to hurt the soccer mom in Acton in her $1.2 million house. It's not going to hurt her. It's going to hurt the people that are trying to rent an apartment in, Attleboro, Fall River, Lawrence, Worcester, Springfield. That's who it's going to hurt. Yeah, the policies are always impacting working class people. They never affect the Volvo driving soccer mom in Duxbury. Never. No, can't do that. She can't feel anything other than living in her little bubble. All right, let's go to Amy Carnevale.
Here, you did all right. You held your ground in the House. You picked up a Senate seat. Look, everybody and their brother has a take on what message, if any, voters in Massachusetts were sending. What's your take?
So, number one, the economy, and number two, immigration. And we
all right, good answers.
Really saw those two issues as interlinked. The immigration situation, particularly with the migrants here in Massachusetts, is affecting the economy. We're spending over $1 billion at the state level every year on migrants, housing them, feeding them, impacting our municipalities at the education and first responders level. So we really saw it as a message to the administration, both at the federal level and at the state level, that they need to rethink policies on migrants and the economy.
Just in the sense of we're unhappy with this economy, so if you're the incumbent, you're in trouble.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I think at the federal level, certainly the energy policy, we've gone from a position.
Right, so enough for that for a second. But I want to kind of reflect upon what this means for 2026. Because clearly, and I was watching the polls, and none of the polls that I was watching did a fave or unfave for Governor Healy. It was almost like they purposely left her out. You almost always would do a fave, unfave for the governor. It's kind of almost like survey research malpractice not to include the governor as just like a control feature so that you know that the other data has some accuracy to it. But none of the polls I saw had a fave, unfave for Governor Healy as we were going through 2024. But I don't think the fave, unfave is the same numbers that she would have had in, say, 2022 or 2023. I think the fave, unfave is not looking too good for her right now. So what does that mean for 2026? I think there are some Republicans, and Amy Carnevale is saying in this piece here, that effectively that some Republicans, if this trend continues, could do well in 2026. And obviously the most important thing is the governorship, especially to find out if Healy is vulnerable. As Republicans come to the realization that maybe she might be vulnerable, more vulnerable than Elizabeth Warren, and that we might actually want to run a candidate that's from Massachusetts. By the way, has John Deaton moved back to Rhode Island yet? Anybody let me know. I'm just curious. In doing that, that's going to attract a significant amount of establishment rhino Republicans to the governor's race if they feel that there's even a hint that they could win. And here's the problem with that. Number one, the way the rhinos think about issues is almost basically Democrat light, right? It's Democrat light. And when you give Democrats the choice between choosing a Democrat or Democrat light, almost always they pick a Democrat. Almost always they pick a Democrat. So from a structural issues point of view, it's a loser. Second, rhinos, because they're establishment people, they'll have a lot of money, but they're going to spend it in trying to get more soccer moms in Wellesley, Acton, Hingham, those type of places, to vote for them. They're going to look at the soccer mom population and saying, how do we get more of them to vote for us? And the problem with that is that A, there's not enough of them to swing the election. I can't stress this enough. There's not enough soccer moms that you could convince to vote for you to swing the election. And B, or two, as my wife would say, they're not amenable enough to your message. They're not amenable enough to your message. The other way to go would be to nominate an actual Republican, especially one if spoke Spanish or Portuguese. That would be like with a cherry on top. That was conservative or an actual Republican. They don't even need to be that conservative, but a real Republican who spoke Spanish or Portuguese and understand the number one rule of politics. The number one rule of politics and the why the Democrats should be very worried about 2026, the way for us to win, I want you to really listen to this. The way for us to win is not to sway more soccer moms. It's to go to places that we almost always lose by a landslide and lose them by less. Jack, what does that mean? It means the glimmer of hope that we saw in Fall River, where I think Trump won Fall River, right? And the glimmer of hope that we saw, the huge shift in voter attitudes in, say, like Lawrence, is to continue that trend in those other similar situated cities like Lowell, New Bedford, Worcester, Springfield. And if you can get a conservative, an actual conservative that is not afraid to say that, I don't know, boys are boys and girls are girls, rather than milquetoast rhino Republican that's going to be afraid of that issue. And if they speak Portuguese or Spanish, added cherry on top for that. If you actually have a conservative that can go into New Bedford and lose it, let's just say 53-47, you have a real chance at winning the corner office for a Republican candidate. By the way, I ran some numbers. Trump lost New Bedford, but John Deaton, who sucked as a candidate, let's just put it that way, he lost New Bedford 57-43, which actually, yeah, not that bad. If you actually had a real candidate who actually went there multiple times, who actually campaigned, you could lose New Bedford 50. You could lose New Bedford 53-47, and now all of a sudden you've changed the whole dynamic in Massachusetts. If you could lose New Bedford 53-47, John Deaton is only a couple of points away from those numbers. In fact, I ran the numbers for what I still call the 10th congressional district, but it's now the 9th, right? John Deaton almost won the 9th congressional district. He lost the 9th congressional district by a whisker. And almost all of the margin that he had was in New Bedford and on the Cape. And if he had lost New Bedford by less, he would have been, if he was running for Congress, he would have been the congressman, right? So that's how important these numbers are. Democrats have always depended upon the New Bedfords of the world. to swing elections for them, whether it's for Congress or state Senate or state rep. But if you can do that statewide, then it's a whole new ballgame. Rule number one of politics: make your weakness your strength. Trump has now shown kind of like the light. Trump has shown the light. And the question for our Republican Party is, are we going to nominate a suit and tie establishment rhino Republican again? Or are we going to nominate a real conservative who's not afraid to be a conservative, who will actually give voters a choice and also might speak Portuguese or Spanish? And can we lose those cities by a smaller margin and maybe even win one or two? All right. Wow. What an unbelievable showing today. Unbelievable. I can't believe how many people, hundreds of people on today's live stream. Thank you so much. I'm John F. Gately. Don't forget to get your Maura clown t-shirt, cartoon clown t-shirt, whatever the hell it is. JohnFGately.printify.me. We'll see you again. Bye-bye.